Well, here we are in the fall of 2013, and I'm the proud owner of a brand new Rubbermaid slide lead shed. I'm going to share my experience of putting this together with you, but before I get started in that part of the video, let me first talk about the different variations of this model that are currently available. If you look on the Rubbermaid website, you'll find that under horizontal sheds, there's only one slide lid shed listed. It's a model 5L40 and it's cream colored. However, if you do a search in the search box for slide lid, you'll find that there are three Rubbermaid slide lid sheds. They all have the same dimensions and appear to be identical. However, they're not. The newer models, the 5L40, have two versions. The second version is a darker color. It's a chocolate brown color and has a handle on the door. Whereas the first model that I mentioned is cream colored, has no handle. There's also a third older model, a model 3752, that shows discontinued on the Rubbermaid website. The reason why it's important to be aware of this model is there are lots of these things still being sold out in the big box stores and on the internet, and there are two significant differences between this older model and the newer 5L40s. First are the instructions. The older model has just a couple of pages of instructions and condensed diagrams. The newer 5L40 models have a whole instruction booklet complete with extensive diagrams, exploded drawings, detailed instructions. This book goes on for 108 pages. So the instructions for putting the new sheds together are much better. The second significant difference is that the older model shed, the 3752, does not have provision for accessory hooks on the back wall. This is important if you plan to use the back wall of your shed for hanging up things, either having shelving or having a pegboard or hooks for hanging up tools or storing other items of that nature. Only the newer 5L40 models have the provision on the back wall for these hooks. Also, you may notice in some of the big box stores, some of the literature that Rubbermaid has talks about the fact that all their sheds allow these accessory hooks on all walls. That's true for the larger size sheds, but when it comes to the smaller slide lid shed, the accessory hooks only fit into the rear wall. I strongly recommend that you go to the website and download the instructions and read them first before you buy your shed. And there are several significant reasons for this. Number one, if you'll see on the first page of the instruction booklet when you download it, Rubbermaid talks about building codes. I didn't think with a small shed of this nature that I would have a problem with a building code. I didn't think I would need a building permit. I was wrong. When I checked the website for my local village where I live, I discovered I do need a building permit. Any type of a shed is considered a building. I suspect this is true in most communities. In my case, it took me several days to complete the application for the building permit because the village asks for a lot of information in order to get a building permit, no matter what it's for. I had to calculate lot usage information. I had to calculate square floor usage information, including how that would be increased by the new building. I had to calculate impervious surface information, including what the new building would do to the total impervious surface on the lot. All of these things take time. You may want to check the information that applies to where you live before you buy your shed to be sure that you will be able to get a permit and you won't have a problem after you've spent your money. Second issue is, where will you put your shed? You'll find that the floor of the shed, which is the first step of construction, putting the floor down, is made out of plastic, and the instructions make it clear you must have a flat, level, and hard surface. You can't just put it on some uneven earth or stone or uneven ground. You need a good location to put it where water will drain away from the shed. So you want to look at where you have in mind putting the shed and make sure that you have a proper area to locate the floor. You may need to do some site preparation. Those issues are covered in the instructions in detail, and again, that's something you want to know before you plunk down your money and buy the shed. You don't want to discover after you spent your money that you don't have a good location where you can put the shed. Congratulations, you've gotten past the first steps, and now you're ready to buy your new shed. The first thing you'll notice when you look at the second page, when you open the instruction booklet, there are some tools that you may not have as part of your household supply that you will need for this project. I'm like most homeowners, I have a reasonable complement of tools, including a variable speed electric drill, but there were several things I didn't have that I bought at the same time as I bought the shed. You'll see them here. There's a rubber mallet. There's a pair of gloves, which are recommended because you do need to do some cutting, and you will be using a knife, which is shown in the upper part of the frame, for cutting plastic, and the gloves are recommended when you're going to do that. Also, they recommend safety glasses, which you will see here on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, I bought some 1/4-inch bits for drilling pilot holes for the screws. Yes, I have a complete set of bits, but if I'm going to be drilling a bunch of pilot holes, I thought I wanted a new bit that was sharp, and I didn't want to dull the existing 1/4-inch bit that I had in my regular box of drill bits. When you buy your shed, you're going to have to transport it to where you want to construct it. So unless you have a truck that's going to deliver the shed to your location, you need to consider carefully the issue of transportation. I'm going to show you how big the box is. It doesn't fit in a regular car. I used my wife's minivan, and I just barely got it in the minivan. So I'm going to go and get the box, and I'll show you how big it is. This is the box. I'll refocus the camera so you can see what it looks like. As you can see, it's as big as me. This thing's huge. You'll need a minivan, a good sized minivan at the very minimum, to fit this in some type of vehicle to transport it to where you're going to put it together. So this is the carton for the Rubbermaid Model 5L40 slide lid shed. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very large. As you can see, it just barely fits into my wife's minivan. I've removed the contents for ease of moving it for weight, but you'll see how large it is. It just barely fits in here. I'm going to take it out. This is how it came when I bought it. And you can see how large it is. So make sure that you have the proper kind of vehicle to try to transport this, or otherwise you're in for a rude surprise when you make your purchase. Good luck! So here it's about 3 weeks later, and I finally gotten my building permit. You can learn from my experience and be sure that you have your building permit situation figured out before you even buy your shed. You want to make sure that not only do your regulations allow what you need to do, but that it won't be too difficult for you to get the permit, and that's well in hand. Also, be sure, as we've previously mentioned, that you have found a good site a flat, level surface to construct the shed, because the floor is only plastic and it does need a good, solid, hard surface that's level and flat. Then the next step, once you buy the shed, is when you look in the instruction booklet, you need to inventory the parts. And for that, I'll show you a little detail that relates to part numbers. So your next step is doing the inventory of the parts. And be aware that there are actually two different kinds of part numbers. I'll show you an example. First of all, I've got parts that I took out of the box all over my garage. There's the bottom half of the box. More parts. Now I'll zoom in on this part and show you the two different kinds of part numbers, which can be a bit confusing when you're doing your inventory. Almost all the parts have a sticker on them, and they have a part number that is in line with the model number of the shed, the 5L40 model number. However, in the instructions, there's a different set of part numbers, and they are embossed in the plastic. Here's an example of this part number. You can see they start with 3T, and they have different numbers. So if you have a problem in double checking your inventory and your part numbers, just be aware that the parts may be listed either with the 5L number or the 3T number. And if you're looking for the 3T number, that's embossed on the plastic. I'll give you another example of a part and where we find the embossed number. Here's the sticker that you can see. And that's got the 5L number. And the part number is embossed in the plastic next to it. As you can see, there's the 3T number. Some of these 3T numbers are a difficult spot to find. So here's my clean, hard, level surface. I'm lucky that I have a piece of driveway that's already paved that's suitable for my shed. This is where I'm going to be locating it. And next we'll start with the first step of construction, which is the floor pieces. So here we are on the first step of putting the floor together. And as you can see, there are 3 floor pieces that are all used. The front piece has the Rubbermaid logo on it. I'll try to get closer so that you can see the Rubbermaid logo. There it is. And this is a stage where we cut holes with the knife. And as you can see, the holes are cut on the short ends. I'll show you a close-up of the slots. Be careful that you do this on the correct end. The long end has similar slots, but that's not where you cut with the knife in the first step. So the slots look like this. And as you can see, I've cut the hole out using the knife. You cut along the 2 long ends. Obviously you can't, it's difficult to cut at the short ends because they're curved. So you cut along the 2 long ends and knock it out with a screwdriver as the instructions say. Here's the other area that's been cut out. You can see the hole. And when you're done, there's 4 of these on the first front piece, and this is what the parts that come out look like. Now, as I said, there are slots of a similar nature on the long ends. They look like this. But in the first step, you do not cut these. So be sure that you use the correct end. The short end is where you do the cutting, not the long end. And I'll show you the other cutout holes on the short end. As you can see, it's an opening that a slot will go into. Next I'm going to be cutting 4 more slots in the middle floor location, the repeat floor that's used in the middle. So this will be 4 slots similar to the front piece, cutting the short ends only. So here is a view of the piece before I've made the cut. And here's the slot that you can see. I'll be cutting along the 2 long lines. I'll be using a utility knife. Here's a detail of what it looks like. There's a handle on the end that I can use to extend the razor blade, the cutting surface. So as you can see, I've extended the middle floor piece, the repeat floor that's going to be the middle section. I've extended the end out so that there's nothing underneath it, because this is a dangerous step. You have to be very careful when you do the cutting that there's nothing underneath that the blade can run into. So I've got it overlapped here where there's nothing underneath it. The first step on the floor installation is to knock out 9 holes on each end of the repeat floors. The instructions tell you use a screwdriver and a mallet, and while that will work, it leaves the back edges behind the hole very rough. I found it more convenient to use a 7/32 drill bit and drill the holes. It was a much cleaner hole. As you can see, here's 2 of the holes, and it's all the way along the long edge of each of the repeat floors. So there's 9 holes on each of the one long end on each of the repeat floors, 18 in total that I drilled with a 7/32 bit. So here I'm going to make a cut with the utility knife, and as you notice that the wall is slightly angled, so I'm turn the knife slightly toward the center just a little bit. I use the tip to punch a hole through. I get as close to the end as I can, and with just a little bit of pressure I can punch right through it, and then I just slice right down the edge of the piece where it meets the wall. Being very careful, and as I mentioned, I overlap this so there's nothing behind this where the blade comes out, so I'm not going to cut myself or run into anything and damage the razor blade. So you get as far to the end as you can. Obviously you can't go around the curved part, but you have a cut from the beginning of each curved end to the other end. Now I'm going to do the other side, and again I'm going to turn the knife slightly toward the center. I'm going to punch the tip through, and then I'll just cut down the long end. And I get all the way to the end as close as I can. Then I'm going to knock out the piece with the screwdriver and the mallet as recommended in the manual. So the end piece is what's still left. I'm just going to knock it, and you see it just comes right out. I'm going to trim this edge piece so that the curved part is cleaned out pretty good. And I'll just work this a little bit, and I'll try knocking out the other end with the screwdriver and the mallet. And you can see that it comes out fairly easily. Here's the piece. That's what's been removed. And if you can zoom in, you now see that there's a fairly neat hole, and there's a tab that's going to go through this slot. So I do this for 4 more slots on the repeat floor for the middle location, and then I do the same 4 slots on the repeat floor at the rear location, plus I do 4 more on the very back edge where the back of the shed's going to be, only on one of the repeat floors, the one that's going to be in the rear. That's the detail as to how you cut with a utility knife. So here are the 2 repeat floors. The tabs have been knocked out. On the piece that's in the middle, we're just doing the 4 on each of the short ends. So it looks like this. You'll see that these have been knocked out. The ones on the long end have not been knocked out. They're still intact. This is the middle piece. So here's the detail, and you can see that it has not been knocked out on the long end, but each of the short ends has been knocked out. Now here's the piece that's going to go in the rear. Again, we've done each of the short ends. There's 4 of these, and then on the long end, those 4 have also been knocked out. So we knocked out altogether 12. That's just on the piece that goes in the rear. Again, the piece in the middle, we're not knocking out the long end. We're leaving that intact. We're only doing 4 tabs on that piece. I'm now on step 2.0 at letter C, and it's knocking out little tabs on the front of the front floor. This is a little bit difficult because you have to go all the way around. So you have to do it in stages and go around in a circle with the screwdriver.
The real drill's gonna fall. Drills.
So you see I'm just going around in a circle, following the outer edge. And there's the hole. As you can see, it's a little bit rough on the edges, so I'm going to use the utility knife to just clean it up a little bit. Try to get a little bit more even of a hole. So there's 2 of these on the front piece that you have to do, and that's what they look like when they're all done. I'm now on step 2.1A, and as you can see on the front piece, there are little marks, so you can zoom in there. There are little marks where you drill the pilot holes. So I'm using the 1/8 inch bit as recommended in the manual, and the manual says to be very careful not to drill through both walls. So I have to go at this fairly slowly. I'm going to get the bit into the mark, and then drill. And that's it. You have to be very careful when it gets through that you don't go to the other wall. And that's what the hole looks like when you're done. This is the pilot hole for the screw. So I've drilled all the pilot holes, and I've now assembled the middle repeat floor to the front piece. I used my electric drill. I made sure that the Phillips head was a good tight fit to the screws. I made sure that I set the tension on my electric drill to the absolute bare minimum. We're only screwing in a plastic. You can strip these, so I've set it on the minimum. So there is the middle repeat floor connected to the front repeat floor. And now I'm going to assemble the back repeat floor. That's the one with the slots cut out at the rear, and that's going to be assembled to the middle repeat floor, again with the screws in the same method. So here I've assembled the repeat floor rear to the front 2 pieces, and again, as I did with the middle part, I was careful to keep the parts aligned and keep them pressed together so that they do have a tendency to spread out as you screw the screws in, so you need to keep your knees pressed against the piece to keep it in place. And now all 3 are done, and I'm going to determine the exact positioning of the floor, because from now on this is going to be staying in whatever position I put it in. So now I finished installing the back left and back right walls and the rear wall, and I raised the rear wall up and fit the dovetails together to the side back pieces. Here's a detail of what that looks like. You don't have to raise it too high up to get it to fit in. This is a stage where having a level floor makes quite a bit of difference. I had a little bit of trouble getting the rear piece to go all the way down to be flush with the rear right wall. So now I've installed wall connectors attaching the front left and the rear left wall. 3 of them. You slide them down into the slots at the top, in the middle, and down at the bottom. That's the 3 wall connectors. And now I've also attached the roof guide to the back of the left front wall. The screws are from the inside out. And here's the roof guide. And as the instructions say, the arrow, which is difficult to see, but there is an arrow at the right side that points to the front of the shed. So now I've assembled the right front part to the rear right wall. Rubbermaid is very helpful. They have an arrow that they embed into the plastic so you know which end goes up. And note that there are vertical grooves on the inside, whereas on the outside the grooves are horizontal, so you know which side goes pointing inward. I've attached the 3 wall connecting pieces, and once again on this, Rubbermaid has put an indicator which side is up. There you can see the up marking in the plastic. So all 3 of those have been installed, and I've installed the roof guide on the right side as well. So I put the 2 gable pieces together using 3 screws as the instructions indicate. There they are. And again, on my electric drill, I used the lowest tension setting. And then I mounted the gable to the back wall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws. Again, using the lowest tension setting. The 2 rear roof parts, L and M, go together at an angle. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws that fasten these pieces together. From on end, you can see how they overlap. This is definitely a step that takes 2 people to keep this aligned properly. I recommend that once you get this aligned, you do only 1 or 2 screws on one end, then you flip the whole unit over, make sure it's aligned at the other end, and then do screws at the other end so that you have both ends aligned properly. I didn't do it that way, and I wound up having to take screws out and wind up flipping the roof over and getting it realigned. Now we're at step 4.0b, and what you see here is piece BB. If you look at the pictorial diagram in the instructions, you'll see that they show that there's only 1 hole on one end and 2 holes on the other end. But as you can see here, the piece actually has 2 holes on each end. So here is piece EE connected to piece BB. And as you can see, I've thread the bolt and the nut through the rightmost hole, and the leftmost hole is still there, notwithstanding the pictorial diagram. And the same thing is true for piece EE, connected to the other piece BB. There are 2 holes in each end, and you just attach it using the innermost hole. The same thing is true for piece DD, connected to the other piece BB. There are 2 holes in each end, and I've just threaded it through the innermost hole. Here we have the completed roof, part 4L and 4M, assembled together. And at the edge of the roof, on the outside, the part that faces up, if you look very closely, there's a little flange on the outside edge. Here we have the completed assembled part BB and DD. And then here's part BB with part EE. If you look at from the end of these pieces, you'll see that there is a flange. See the flange on the back edge? That's going to hook over the outside edge of the roof. Here's another view of part 4L on the left, the roof part, and you can see that there's a little edge on the back part of the lip on the outside part of the roof. So here we have part CC and DD, and as I've said, it goes on the left part of the roof, part 4L. So what we do is, we come to the outside part of the roof, and we rotate the flange, and we go under the flange on the outside part of the roof, and we slide back and forth until it will rotate over like that, and it locks into place. We do the same thing with part BB and EE on the right side on part 4M. Once again, we rotate the flange over, we put it on the outside of the roof, then we slide it back and forth until it gets into place where it will rotate over. It takes a little bit of maneuvering, and then it goes over, and it fits flush to the edge of the roof. I've now completed through step 4.0D. Now there's a little trick when you put the crossbar support on. The angle of the roof may not be exactly right for the length. You want to make sure that the holes match up on each end of the cross piece. And so you may have to spread the roof open or a little more closed in order to make the holes line up right for the cross piece. This cross piece, when the holes line up correctly, that sets the angle of the roof at the joint. I've set the roof on top of the back of the shed, and I've lined up parts DD and EE. So as you can see, one part of part DD is on the inside of the shed, and the other part of the bracket is on the outside. Same thing for part EE on the right side. One part of the bracket is on the outside of the frame, and the other part is on the inside. I now pulled the roof a little bit forward, and it snapped into place. It doesn't move back and forth. You can see the flanges line up right about in the middle of the connecting piece. And they're in the same spot on both sides. And the roof now does not move back and forth. It's locked into place. Okay, I've completed step 4.0F. The instructions tell you to have a second person hold the roof down, and the roof does tend to ride up when you work on it, especially if you're alone and you don't have a second person helping you. I recommend, if you try to do this alone, do the back screws at the center of the roof in the rear first. One on the left and one on the right at the peak. And then do the front left screw and the front right screw and then work your way back. As I said, the roof does tend to ride up. Check it often and pound down on the top with your fist to make sure that the roof is really flush. It does tend to ride up. So knock it down and go all the way around to the back, on the front and on the back, and make sure, check frequently, stop frequently, and make sure it's not riding up as you're drilling holes and driving in the screws. Here's step 4.1a completed, and this is part O. It's the right front roof, and if you look at the detail on the plastic, if I can get close enough, you'll see that there is a large arrow that points towards the middle of the roof. This is the right, so the middle is the part where part GG goes. Part N is the left roof, and again on the detail of the plastic it has a large arrow that points towards the middle of the roof. I'm standing in the shadow, but I think now you can see the arrow. So this will be assembled to part O using GG. In order to get part O to match up with GG to connect to N, I've had to put the pieces on end. You have to line up the proper angle all the way along part GG. This is another step where it's a lot easier if you have two people to help you, but you have to get the right angle and get GG flush to part N all the way along from top to bottom. Okay, I've lined up part N to O with GG in the middle. This is very tricky. You have to get the angle just right. The instructions recommend that you put one screw in the middle first, which is a good idea, and then, especially if you only have one person, making sure that the angle is exactly right and GG is flush. I did one at the very end at the top. Now I'm going to flip the piece over and do the other end and make sure it's lined up right next. Now I flip the piece over the other way and holding it very carefully to make sure the angle is right and part GG is flush. I've done one screw at the top and one more screw below it to make sure the angle's right. Now I'm going to flip the piece over again and drive some more screws, making sure that GG is flush and the angle's right on the other side. So here's step 4.1b complete. The front roof, left and right pieces connected together by virtue of GG. Note that you put 7 screws in GG. There's an 8th screw in step 2, which is at the very top of the roof. It's put in right there. In step 4.1c, we're going to be looking for roof guides, part number 3T20. If you're looking for the part number, it's on the very edge of the plastic. You have to get right up to the edge, and if you look very closely on the edge, you can see the part number. 3. Okay, step 4.1 C and D is done. I had a little trouble with the pins, getting the slide into the holes, and what I discovered was that the pins were slightly wider than they needed to be, so I had to bend it just slightly to get them to go into the holes. Step 4.2a is now done. And there are the roof pins. Steps 4.1b and c are complete, and as with the back roof, on the front roof, part JJ is used to set the angle of the roof in the middle. On step 4.1D, there is a note that you have to lift up on the front. The metal bars that go across the front have to be lifted up and raised to fit across the front of the shed. What they don't tell you is the back part also has to be lifted after you move the front further back. To complete the step, you have to lift up on simultaneously on the left and right sides of the back part of the roof. Someone inside has to push up while someone in the front slides it backwards in order to clear the front of the back part of the roof. Step 4E is done, the roller installation, and I just lift it up by pushing on the bar with my head in order to get the rollers in and aligned and tight. Alright, with step 4.3A, putting in the hinge pin on the front left door, the hinge pin when you first start out doesn't want to go all the way down. You might have to rotate the door closed to get it to go into place where it goes all the way down. If you don't get it all the way down, the roof will collide and not fit over it. So you have to make sure you get it all the way down, and then you can close the door and put in the screws. Step 4.3 is now done. Part B, the right door is done, and again with the hinge pin, you got to make sure that it's pounded all the way down as far as it will go so that the roof will clear before you screw it in. So the Rubbermaid Model 5L40 slide lid shed is done. I spent a little less than 5 hours, but I was being very careful, and I worked alone most of the time instead of having two people. You may go a little more quickly, but I was very careful to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. What did I have left at the end? Well, I had about an extra half a dozen screws. Rubbermaid is generous that they make sure you have enough, and one extra bolt. Also, we have the 8 accessory hooks that go in the back wall if you want to hang a shelf or a pegboard or some other method of keeping tools or items in the back. Here's the bag of the 8 accessory hooks. This comes with the shed, and I'll take one out, and as you can see, they just slide into the slots in the back wall, and then there's a screw on the front for attaching things. So now I'll start installing all 8 on the back wall. Alright, so as you can see, there are holes in the plastic in 8 places in the back wall, and the back part of the accessory hook just slides into the hole and it just fits right in. It's very easy to install all 8 in the holes in the back wall. The next step is to install the upright extensions that go again on the back wall that mount to the accessory brackets. This is what they look like. Now, most of the larger Rubbermaid sheds use the 47.5-inch shelving upright, but this shed, the 5L40, is only 42 some inches tall. The 47.5-inch shelving uprights won't fit. You need the shelving, extension, the upright extension with connectors. It's only 25 inches long. And the detail of what that looks like is right here. So I want the shelving extension to go as high up in the shed as possible, so I'll be fastening the accessory brackets to the bottom 2 holes of the extension. We just take the Phillips screws out, put them through the holes in the extension, and screw them back into the accessory brackets. So I have the screw out of the accessory bracket. I'm going to put it through the hole in the upright and then screw that back into the accessory bracket. I found it easier to take the bracket out of the wall and then put the screw through the upright and then put the bracket in the back and tighten the screw this way. I started it by hand. I'll tighten it up with a screwdriver later. Now I'm going to do the bottom one, the same thing. I found that the easiest way to get the accessory hook started into the extension bracket is to turn the bracket on its side, feed the screw through, put the accessory bracket behind it, and while it's on its side, it's easier to get the thread started. And as I said, you just thread it enough just to hold the bracket, because you need leeway when you're going to put it in the back of the shed. When you attach the accessory hooks and you start threading them by hand, you just go barely enough to hold the accessory hook in. If you screw too far, you won't be able to fit the brackets into the holes in the wall. You need to leave plenty of play to fit it in. I've now got it in place. I'm going to tighten up the screws with the screwdriver, the Phillips screwdriver. And now the first shelving extension is in place and mounted to the wall, ready for things to be hung from it. I'm going to repeat the same process for the other three to finish all four in the shed. So all of the 25-inch extensions are in, and I should have mentioned earlier, all of these accessories, these Rubbermaid accessories that go in this shed, are from the Home Free series. Rubbermaid has a couple of other series for garages and some for closets. Those are not compatible with this shed. They must be the Home Free series. Now the next step is to put in the shelving uprights so that we can put a shelf in the back of the shed, and they just snap into place on the uprights. Snap into place, you angle them up a little bit, and then they slide down and into the slot. Okay, we have the four shelving uprights in place, mounted to the 25-inch extensions, and the next step will be to put in the shelf. This is the label from the Rubbermaid Home Free series shelves. There's two sections of 4 feet each, so they'll just barely fit one each to the width of the shed. So now I'm going to take the actual shelf and put it on the shelf uprights. So now we have our first shelf installed in the back of the shed. As you can see, it's very convenient to be able to have a shelf in the back of the shed for holding small items. You can put in another shelf if you want, or several if you have a lot of small items. Another option that Rubbermaid has that will fit in the back of the shed is pegboard. A piece like this. And they have a pegboard accessory kit that comes with 43 pieces and allows you to hang up all kinds of tools and other items. All of these items are Rubbermaid items, but they're only available from Lowe's. As far as I can tell, the only place you can buy them is Lowe's. So I've included the Lowe's part numbers in this video. And that's it for the Rubbermaid slide lid model 5L40 shed, and we're all done. Good luck to you.